Oh, there's the recording. Okay. And you can have access on your own time to go to the website, which I think some of you have done. And I certainly encourage you to go to the website because there's such a visual presence of storytelling and symbolism there that I would, encourage you all to dwell with for Rasha, to know Rasha better. And I can read her bio, but I don't really want to read the bio. I want to say how I know her, how I know Rasha, because I've just been so thrilled to get to know Rasha. I met her in January of this year through a program that I'm taking. I'm a student of visual storytelling, not quite as advanced at all as Rasha is. And I'm in a program in which she is serving as a very involved teacher assistant. And I have noticed as I've gotten to know Rasha that she's very observing. She's truly a participant. Sometimes you can have assistants to a professor and they're not really playing along, right? They're over at the other side of the playground. And Rasha is not like that. And it may seem that she at times is not, say, like on screen, but always listening, always knows what's going on. Her observations are truly authentic and direct. She's got very direct language, and I appreciate that a lot. I also like knowing that when she looks at imagery, she sees things that other people aren't seeing, whether it's the color that comes up on someone's skin, or it's a pose that someone has, or it's the light through the window. And I just appreciate that as someone who loves story and how story is texture and story is emotion. And I wanted to start off and ask you a question, Rasha, about symbolism, and especially something that you do so well in your work and what you write about in the piece towards the end. And some of the people here, they work in communities in which the symbols that they use to tell their story, let's say it's about girl education or maternal health care or clean water, that there's a tendency to be derivative or to use those kinds of symbols, right, that people use a lot and that might have less personal value to them. I'd like for you, if could you talk a little bit about how communities can find those symbols, whether it's a wall or it's birds in the sky or it's cacti, or how can people looking to raise their voices about a community that's marginalized and probably pretty generalized, how can they find symbols that speak their story?
Well, there's two ways. The two ways are related, whether you're part of the community that you're trying to tell the story about, or you are from outside the community. So if you're part of the community, you will obviously be able to easily dig deeper into your own culture, your own history, your own heritage, traditions, and you will find the symbols there. I was just actually working on a story that is about symbolism in Palestinian traditional embroidery. And these symbols go back 4,000 years ago to the Canaanite era. So these are Canaanite symbols. And many of them were actually symbols of the gods that they worshipped. So one of these symbols is actually a star symbol. And the star has 8 sides. And it is apparently because the star, which then this is BC, this is 4,000 years BC, right? So this star then for them, it was a symbol of planet Venus, and it used to guide shepherds on the way to herd their goats. And then it became known as the shepherd's star, which is now mentioned in the Bible. So it is actually this is symbolism in a culture, in a heritage that just kind of passed through time, and it still lives on people's clothes today, and it tells a story. So because I'm part of that culture and I dig deeper, I read, I listened, I met people who did this research, I know about it. Now, if you're from outside the culture, and maybe you're telling a story of somebody or of a community that you don't know and you're getting introduced to it, definitely the first thing to do is to ask them and look around. When you're telling a story visually and you know this scale very well, you really taking images or making images. I like to use the word making. Sorry, I'm always trying to correct myself, not taking, making. really the art of looking. You're always looking around. You're looking at things that are moving, still on the floor, up, down, sideways, everywhere. And maybe something catches your eye and you ask questions. Maybe it's significant, maybe it's not. And I'll give another example. When I was doing a story on the Maasai in Kenya, north of the Rift Valley in Laikipia County, I came across these, I spent like 7 months with them. So obviously there's a lot of types of trees, and as is, part of the traditional and very close knitted heritage of the Maasai with the land around them and with the nature around them, they naturally start telling you about the trees and the plants around you without you asking. They start like offering information. So because they learn this growing up, especially the men as boys, becoming warriors and so on. So then I look at this tree and it catches my eye because it is very different from the other trees. It has this very intricate stem, very big, very long, and very huge, but only a few of them actually exist. And they actually told me it's right. This tree is a very holy tree for the Maasai. And if we have a ceremony, we will slaughter at the base of this tree and worship for 3 or 4 days. Maybe asking for rain, maybe asking for something that is, the occasion that they're praying for. So, of course, I took a picture of it, or I made a picture of it, and it was part of my project because this is a very important symbol for that culture. And the fact that there's only a few of them left because of logging, because of the reduced land size, so people have to clear the land in order to live and so on, many reasons. But it is a symbol that is very important for them culturally and traditionally, and that just reflects things that are beyond the obvious for me as an outsider. So I hope these two examples kind of answer your question, whether you're part of it or you're from outside.
Yes, it does. It does answer the question. It's really so important, as you say, to dwell in a place, dwell with a community if it's not your own, and even if it is your own, to because these believers are working all the time to promote their mission, right? Their initiative. And sometimes we can get so busy in the work that we're doing, even with our own community, that we might not, quote unquote, see something. So just to add on to that, looking for symbols. Is it a hand holding another hand? Is that something that your community does a lot? Is a lot of hand holding, and how does that relate to the message that you want to send about your work, about your passion, about the activism? And let's see, Maribel, you had your hand up. Do you want to ask a related question or not?
Yeah, but I'm happy to wait for you to finish your thought.
No, I'm done. That's okay. Why don't you tell us where you're from, or where you are and what your work is? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Maribel Rodriguez, or Maribel Rodriguez, and I currently work in Prince George's County, Maryland, in the library system. I also am the founder of a project called Love for Immigrants, and we do exhibits every year. We try to change the narratives to add more positive stories through art and through storytelling. And I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. So my question for you is, I did photography when I was an undergrad and then went to study social entrepreneurship. So the work that you do is really interesting, and I'm just really happy to see a humanitarian photographer. It's not every day that I get to be in a room with one. So the one thing that I found difficult when trying to do photo essays, and with Love for Immigrants, that's the way we started. It was with photo essays, is the content could be there, but then having the word spread about the stories, I found to be the most difficult part. In your experience, what did you do to share stories, yours and maybe of even others, that were with this theme of humanitarian storytelling and photography and visual stories, so that more people can be a part of that change?
Mm-hmm. Well, after you're done with your content and editing and you have a final edit, depending on the audience, I suggest, obviously, there's the obvious route of social media and the different parts of social media, because it's really powerful. It's really annoying, and I really don't like it. but I have to do it. And so it takes so much time to do it. Oh my God. But definitely through social media. But the other thing is zines, fanzines, the concept of fanzines or making zines. A fanzine is like a word that is basically derived from magazine and fan. So it's kind of combined to say fanzine, and a fanzine, you can Google it. And a fanzine is basically a self-published product. So that's started with artists and photographers who don't have money to make a book, basically. And, bookmaking is like $25,000 plus to produce a photography book. Usually people do it through grants and through scholarships and so on, so with support. However, if you don't have that, and obviously not many people have that money to do a whole book, and maybe you don't need that, but you just need to spread a story, fanzines are the best way to do it. So one example, and you can find it actually on my website now, I put a couple of zines and I'm going to put more because I'm a huge fan of them. I made so far 2, but I would say one is maybe more proper zine. And there's a third one on the way. I'm going to reveal it on Friday because it will be starting to go on sale on Friday. But one of them is really a foldable poster. So it's like a poster that I folded by hand. So I printed it. The printing cost nothing because it's double-sided A3 paper. The only thing that actually cost me more than printing is the type of paper, because I was very anal about selecting the type of paper. But otherwise, the printing was, a few dollars here in Nairobi, in the middle of the city. Then I folded it by hand, and and all of these kind of videos of how to make different types of zines are on YouTube. So I basically taught myself how to fold it. And it kind of opened up into an A3 poster. So from one side is the story with a few images, and from the other side is kind of a gift for whoever buys it, like an A3 image, which you can frame. And then I made a cover for it from sandpaper and kind of wires from a hardware store. So the whole thing really, the cost of making one zine was $7. And I sold it for 10. But if I mailed it, and I did mail a few around the world, mostly to the US, $15 to cover the cost of mail. And with that, I raised more than around $300 for the community that was photographing, which at the time came at the time of inflation, the start of the inflation in Kenya. They really appreciated, especially some of the households that were more vulnerable than others and didn't have any animals and so on. So zines are a great tool. They are cheap. You can go as cheap as you want or as expensive as you want. Some zines are sold for $100, not really that cheap. But the idea is to be economic and easy to grab for people. So you can go, I would say keep it between $15, $20, maybe $40 sales price. So that will inform your costs. It's always handmade. It's always very limited edition as well for zines. So you don't make like 100 of them. You make you could make 100 if they're just printed. But if it's really handmade, you probably will make between 20 or 30, maybe 50 max. So I produced another one, which is like a newspaper, basically in my attempt to debunk some of the German media lies, in my opinion, about the Palestinian community. And this is going to go to Berlin tomorrow. It's been printed in Palestine, and it's getting there tomorrow. So it will go live to be sold on Friday. For that, because it is a newspaper, just because it's printing only, and it didn't really cost, the cost of one print was $1.2. I printed 100 because it was a cheaper cost. So it will be sold only for $5. So that's, I hope, will kind of go as fast as possible. It is still an art product, but it has more narrative, but it is still a photography product because it has a lot of my images in it. And so on. So I think zines I'm a big fan of them. You can really find a lot of websites to talk about zines, to guide you through different ideas. You can really go, again, as cheap as you want or as expensive as you want, depending on, who do you want to reach with that zine. So yeah, that would be my advice for that.
Thank you. And I have another question, unless other people have questions too.
Go for it, Maribel.
So with the library work, we have a page called Immigrant Proud, and a lot of our work is centered around some of those just very practical services that people need on a day-to-day basis, like English classes, computer literacy classes. So for that type of community of people who are just, working like 2 and 3 jobs, and I'm here in America, but we probably find the same thing in other countries of the world. What how do you bridge the gap for the actual community to be a participant or at least be a viewer of the work when so much of their day-to-day is just surviving and trying to build that dream? So I don't know, you've already maybe mentioned the experience of fundraising for your community, but are there other ways that you've engaged communities that typically wouldn't be into the arts per se, because photography is an art?
I would say bring it to their spaces, I mean, put it out there, put it up in the streets, put it up in the neighborhoods. It doesn't have to be, there was actually part of Gail's class, one of the students, and I like him a lot. He said like we should dismantle all galleries and like this, this capitalist system of showing art to a specific, tier of the society. So I would say bring it to people's spaces. So I took, for example, the project that I did with the Maasai back to the community and showed it to them. So we actually, I got a generator and fuel and put it and plugged it in the middle of the community and brought a screen, plugged my computer to it and showed them the images and gave out a few copies of the zine, which was just, the foldable thing without the cover, just for them to have some. That's in addition to the prints that I gave them separately for individuals if they had some portraits with me. So so bring it out to the community. I don't think that, there's many ways of, again, printing images with very cheap, printers and cheap paper, something that doesn't cost a lot. And this can be also sourced with crowdfunding for it, and then just putting it out there in poster form or something, and that can bring it closer to the people to look at it and to interact with it. But bring it to the people. There's a very cool project that was done in Lebanon many years ago, which makes me feel very old, but it's called in Arabic lahza, which means moment. And the idea now is replicated around the world. It's not a new idea, but the idea was to give little boys and girls, actually as young as, I would say there was 3 or 4 years, so very young, and as old as 16, 17. So any child basically living in a Palestinian refugee camp in the country since 1948. So that's this year, 75 years. They gave them disposable cameras. So it was like 2 photographers, gave them a lot of disposable cameras, 1 each, gave them a quick workshop, 1-day workshop on how to use a camera, the basics of using a camera, and let them go with the cameras. Then they came back. I don't know, I think they gave them like a month or so, came back, collected the cameras and developed them. The work that came out was phenomenal. I mean, I haven't seen anything like this. I mean, if you're talking about symbols, there's an image that I cannot take out of my head. I have the book from that project by a 4-year-old who took an image of his grandfather's ID cards from historic Palestine. He put them on the bed and he photographed them, and he's 4. He's 4. So you can imagine how like these children as young as 4 years old, just started using the toilet alone maybe a year or 2 years earlier, now knows how to use a camera and thought about symbolism, and thought about how maybe something really important in the family, just put it on the bed and just took a picture as still life. That was very phenomenal. Now, to get this art to the community, this was a kind of a moving exhibition. So the images were printed and kind of moved across the country in different refugee camps. Also was displayed in galleries and for all the rich people as well on the other side of the city, but also was brought, most importantly, to the community that made the images and produced them. They were very happy to see their images, of course, printed, selected, and huge, of course, prints, so for them to see it. So I would say this would be the one way to bring it to the community and fit it within their schedule, and be sensitive to their life and daily, hustle, because people do have things to do. They don't have time to always sit. But if you bring it and kind of schedule a few events around it, people will take a moment and step into that world and see.
Thank you. There's so much to learn.
Wow, so exciting. Great conversation. And I really like that you pointed out how it is even the quietest person or the youngest person who's going to have the observation, right? It's not just the adults in the room who know how to talk about what's going on. It's everyone around. I think, bienvenue. Hello, how are you?
Yes, Gael.
Yes, hello. You have a question?
Yeah, yes, I do.
Can you tell us again about where you're calling from?
Yeah, I'm from Democratic Republic of Congo, the eastern part of Democratic Republic of Congo. I'm very interested with Russia background because I have been learning the bio that Abby have sent us in box, and to me it's look like we have the same particularity actually with what Russia is doing
I
because
think we,
actually,
oh, just sorry to interrupt because Rasha, I think we just lost her. So let's give her a second. There we go. Awesome. Welcome back, Rasha. Okay, sorry, bienvenue, continue.
I
okay,
think it's about, that's just a sign that it's about to rain in Nairobi.
so I was saying I'm very happy because I've been going through the bio that Abby have sent us in box about your work that we are doing, and we have found some similarity about what we are doing in DRC, because actually, remember, you for Change is working in displaced camp with refugees and displaced communities, as the eastern part of Democratic Republic of Congo have been in war now since more than 2 years. There is a huge number of displaced community people who are moving around, and we are working now in humanitarian phase, as I remember you for Change, with young ladies, with kids, and we still we have done one big activities with a young lady in the camp to distribute hygienic kit pad from our sewing program with Remember You for Change. We have distributed 4,000 hygienic kit pad for 1,000 young girls in 4 camps, so displaced camps. So when I've been reading your work you're doing with displaced community, I've been wondering what can be your input in the local organization that is working in this area. What can be your experience and what can be your input or your word to this organization, so you can connect worldwide to amplify the result of the work that is doing locally, because we have a huge audience. We have now 5 camps that is in Goma town, and we have more than 100,000 people displaced in displaced camps, and all those are our targets. And if you are going in our Facebook page or YouTube pages, you will find how huge we are doing with them and how we are trying to work. So what can be your input and your word to a local organization that have this huge responsibility, but with a limit that you can know local organization have?
Yes, I totally understand. And I worked with, I started working with my work with local organizations, and I am now working with local Kenyan organizations. So I understand the limitations that local civil society organizations face in terms of funding and resources to continue their work. And I think you're really the backbone of every society as a civil society organization. That's how that's how societies or communities find their voice and find their resilience in times of shock, let's say. And I am very much aware of the situation in DRC because I worked, and I'm going next week to Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya that has a huge community from the DRC. And some of them, because I worked there for 1 year, 2 years ago, And I know that there's new arrivals now because of the flare-up in the conflict in the eastern side of DRC. It's a very rich community in terms of culture, beautiful music, and amazing food. So these are this is how I kind of met and ate with and discussed things with my DRC brothers and sisters in Kakuma. Well, it's a tricky question, but obviously because of the limited resources, you'll have to do with what you have. And basically try to kind of work around that. I mean, in situations like this, there's the most important thing to keep in mind always is, and this applies to all situations actually in general, is people's dignity and people's privacy and people's right to say no. So the word consent is a big word, and sometimes some people don't understand what it means. And what I believe it means is that it is a process. Consent is not just a yes or a no. It is a kind of a circular process that somebody can say yes now and then take away their yes later, and you have to be aware of it. So the most important thing, because of the humanitarian situation and the flare up in the conflict and the atrocities that are happening, you really need to always remind yourself and your team how to behave, basically. Even if you're from the community, it doesn't mean that you are in the same position. There's still a position of power here. So always be mindful of that, and remember that you have a powerful position, given that you are actually handing out very essential stuff like sanitary napkins for women and girls, especially in this situation. So just be aware of that, and be aware that there's a code of conduct related to that, and that is also stretched to storytelling. So photography in itself is a very unethical medium, and this is how it inherently is. It is a Western invention. The camera is a Western invention, the first camera invented in France. And now it's kind of becoming a global thing, especially with the smartphones. Now everybody has a camera, right? So so you just be mindful that it's a very colonial and unequal tool. That said, obviously we can always use it to switch that and give people the voice and the power to tell their stories. So that's just my first thought. Always remember your place of privilege and your place of power, given that you are handing out something that is so valuable for this community at this time in their lives. So remember that, and remind your team of that. So second of all, then the dignity and all the questions that go through it. So basically just being mindful of, even with your limited resources, just having the right gender balance in the team, and how different people are approached by different individuals to tell their story, and reminding people that they have every right to withdraw their consent. I don't want to imply that people are weak, Actually, there's this assumption among photographers and in the photography community that people are not, they are weak and they're not going to say no. People are very powerful, and they will say, don't take my photo all the time. They can actually even attack you. I mean, we've been in situations where photographers are attacked for having a camera on them, not by police or by a government or by silencing, just by individuals who don't want to have their photo taken. So people are pretty are not weak or something. Just remember that there are images that should not be taken without, especially of an individual, without their consent in a humanitarian situation, because we don't want to kind of spread the images of this. I don't want to say, I mean, usually it's called poverty porn, quote unquote, in poor communities, but this is in a stable situation. But I would say we don't want to feed into the misery of people and take images of their kind of undignified existence that is not even because of their doing. It's a situation that is beyond their control. Then I would say, look at what you have. Practically speaking, look at what you have in terms of tools, the cameras, the tools that you have. Keep them safe, maintain them as much as possible, because the last thing you want to do is buy a new one, because they cost a lot of money. If you have to buy one, if you have some funds, try to look for something that is secondhand but in good condition. That would be my suggestion. You know, have people who use them have to know how to use them, and in order not to ruin them, this is what I mean, and to use them in the right way, because sometimes you have one shot or one minute to take an image or to make a story, so do not like waste time. So people in your organization, your team, have to be able to know how to use the tools. Have the storyline or what you want to capture, you know, that day or that week ready beforehand, so that you don't have to go and be like, oh, I don't know what to say, or I don't know what to ask, you know. If people, I do suggest giving people time and space to tell their story, finding a spot in that camp that is a little bit more private, even as much as possible. And I can imagine maybe it's difficult in some settings, but as much as possible, and have an outline to kind of ask that person a few questions. Be mindful, depending on the situation, if it's difficult or if it's not advisable to take their name, keep it anonymous for protection reasons, of course. As you know, you probably know more than me the situation there. You know, if they want to not have their image taken, but you still want to have a visual, try to negotiate with them to make an anonymous image. So there's many ways of making a portrait of somebody without taking their face. And you can always show them the image. If you have a digital camera, which I'm sure is the tool that you use, because these are cheaper these days than film cameras, show them the image and take their consent that, can I use this one? So that they are involved in the choice of the image that you want to use. What else? These are the practical issues. If you have a way to record the voice, that also adds a little bit more to the story. So other than text and the image that you want to use, people's voices really add a lot to a story. People can hear them, can hear their tone, and you know, there are many tools to use for recording. Even phones now these days can record with very good quality. So if you have tools to kind of record and then edit the audio, I would also encourage that, and to pair it up with images. I think it's very powerful, and it's also very simple in a way.
Thank you, Rasha. On your side, because remember, you for change, we are working with former child soldiers.
Okay.
We have been switching to humanitarian because of the needs on the field. So, those former child soldiers, we are teaching them different works and different activities. If you would like to add photography, would you be a coach?
Oh, definitely. Oh my God. If English is not a problem, I don't know if French is. Je ne parle pas français, but if English is not a problem, I would love to be a coach. And this is a question for me or a question for
the challenge?
The problem is the language, but otherwise, of course, definitely. I mean, I only met, my experience, I met child soldiers in South Sudan and in Yemen, obviously completely different settings, to completely different cultures and ways of communication. And one was more difficult than the other. South Sudan was more difficult or more challenging for me than Yemen. And I generally, it's very interesting. It would be very interesting for me to engage with former child soldiers, because I only engaged with child soldiers as active child soldiers who were in fact really dangerous, especially in South Sudan. Yeah, I mean, if there's a way to go around the language, or if I can give you a few tips, I'd be very happy to engage for sure. You can reach out to me on social media. I can put again my social handle here and my email, and we can definitely discuss further.
Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you. And I just want to underscore that, you know, when I think telling one story at a time, you know, in all of the ways that Rasha was suggesting, even though you say that there are 100,000 people that you want the world to know about, right? You want funders to support their lives, right? And but I do think that it is very helpful to do one person at a time as you get to know the community. Maybe understand the power of one voice in connection to elevating the power of the 100,000. There's a dog barking here. Sorry about that. And I think that that's my personal approach, is like to as I get to know a community, and if I want to tell the story of thousands, I need to tell the story of one at first. And I think some of the tools that Rasha was suggesting will help do that. You don't have to have a film crew. You don't have to have 70 cameras. You can have one person, one phone, one day, and trust that what you know about the community and what that person knows will come through. Ian, I think that you had a question. Are you there?
Yeah,
Hi.
I just had to turn off my camera because of connectivity. But
Yes, it did start raining here. I don't know if it's raining there, Ian, but it is now raining cats and dogs.
it's drizzling. My question was from a barrier perspective in terms of what you've seen or what you faced. Because traditionally, I think for print and written media, most of the time it's a language barrier or a lack of understanding or perspective when it comes to narrative. So have you experienced something similar with photography in terms of people not necessarily seeing the narrative that you're telling through your pictures, or struggling to communicate with certain groups or certain people because of well, for lack of a better word, the image language barriers that might exist?
100%. I mean, photography or images are culturally interpreted. You know, you and I can see the same image and we can interpret it completely differently. You know, I can love one, you can hate it at the same time. And we will both cite why, and we will both probably be shocked at why, or each other's opinions if we look at the same image. So it is also kind of organically, this is what photography is. It is very subjective. Sometimes it doesn't relay the same message because the audience is different. Now, this is why you should, first of all, decide on the aim, the intent of the story that you want to make. You know, why do you want to make the story? There has to be a reason for it. Why you want to tell this story of somebody, one person, or a community, or a certain group of people within that community, or even a certain object within that community, something, not even a person. There has to be something related to that topic that you want to get into to the audience. So based on that intent and reasoning, I think that will just inform how you will go about making the series of images, and then how you will edit them. Because you see, in the editing phase, and by editing, this is something that came up also in Gail's class, doesn't mean post-production, which doesn't mean Photoshop and, you know, retouching. It means selecting images and then sequencing them. This is what I mean by editing. You can always come up with a story from different edits of the same project. You know, you can put one at the beginning, one at the end, and you can tell a completely different story. You can remove two images and then suddenly it's a completely different statement. So this is also the beauty of photography, that you can actually, if you have a good enough photographer, or if you have a good enough team of photographers or team of storytellers, you will probably have a lot of material to work with and flexibility to target different audiences with different statements. Maybe your target is to reach more, maybe you need more funding for your organization or your team, so you're reaching donors, specific donors with a specific agenda, and you're aware of it, so you want to reach them with something. Or you want to reach out to other organizations to collaborate with them and cooperate with them, and you just want to showcase a certain project and so on. So and the results of that. So yes, the short answer to your question is yes, you might actually end up relaying the not the message that you intended, but you can resolve that by, first of all, knowing your intention and working around it. The second thing I would advise to do is always to show, like, let's say you're done. You have a series of 20 solid images and you're very happy with it. It has text as well. And before the text, you just want to show the visuals to someone. I suggest showing it to people who are outside of that context. So outside of that organization, team, even outside of the photography world, or the visual world, who doesn't have anything, and ask them, what do you see? What is the message that you get out of this series? The second thing is definitely show it to a child. Children don't lie. And let's say you want people to be entertained by your story, So if your story comes out to be boring to a child, you're not going to entertain anybody. Definitely adults will not be, children are like quickly entertained or quickly bored, but they will be honest about it. So show it to a child who, of course, is at an age who can communicate what they see, or show it to somebody who's outside of that, like out of the context, who will tell you also what they see. Always, you can also reach out to me, Ian. We're in the same city, but if we cannot meet, you can email me. I'm happy to see and tell you what I see. And you can also show it to somebody from the community or somebody from that context that you're actually telling the story about, to see if they actually see what you try to relay about them before you give it to a wider audience. Just kind of the audit. And give you the feedback before you finalize it. So, you will have drafts, and there's a lot of ways around trying to make sure that you get the right message across.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful and very insightful. Actually, I'd never thought about the children angle before. And when you mentioned it, I went back to a time I'd taken a picture of my nephew and I showed it to him. His first word was no.
No, remove that. That's hilarious.
Yes, that's good. I'll definitely be reaching out.
You're welcome. Of course, please do.
Amazing. This has been so rich, and just glanced at the time, and I can't believe that we've actually gone through quite a bit of conversation, and I feel like there's a lot more that we could talk with you and about some of these ideas. So thank you, Rasha, again. I want to switch gear and talk a little bit about fundraising and some of your experience with that. And the last time we met, you mentioned a little bit about your experience fundraising and having done that at a local NGO level, and then you've also done that at and having worked with larger organizations like Save the Children and the German Development Corporation, and now going back to working with a local organization with Film Aid. My specific question, and this might be relevant for quite a few people here who mostly lead local organizations, is what are some lessons that you've learned along the way that can really help some of our more early stage nonprofit leaders in overcoming their fundraising challenges, especially because they're oftentimes so far away from places where the funding decisions are made? What are some kind of strategies that you've seen where successful organizations in your mind have been able to kind of attach themselves or successfully actually recruit funders for their projects and their work?
Well, it's never going to stop being a challenge, whether you're a big organization or small one. The only difference is that big organizations have way more internal resources to keep themselves afloat. That's the secret. And they have a lot of offices and people sitting in those capitals that give them money. And they lobby a lot. You can't imagine how many people actually sit in Capitol Hill in DC and beg, basically. That's their job. Now, at a local level, I think try to definitely having, first of all, a very clear mandate of your organization, very clearly communicated and very nicely illustrated. There's a lot of free softwares that are online that you can use to have a nice, attractive flyer, or even it could be online. It doesn't have to be printed, of your mission, your vision, your what you're trying to do, what you're trying to reach, and your strategy for the next, I don't know. Strategy is a big word, but your action plan, let's call it that, for the next 3 to 5 years. Yeah. So that this person that you're trying to fundraise from is aware that that you did your homework, that you know what you're going to do, and you know who you're going to work with, and you know what you're going to achieve in these next few years, and you know how you're going to react if a catastrophe hits, or an earthquake, or a flood, or drought, climate change, or war, or something happens in the area where you're working. So donors in general like to see that you have your homework done, let's say, and that you're telling them this is what you're going to do, and these are the quick wins, how their money will be spent. And second of all, like, the other thing that's always worrying donors, institutional donors, I'm saying big ones, is the internal structures of the organization, that their reports are clear, that they're regular, that their annual finances and HR and operational documents are all intact and happen and are being documented and filed and so on. And they have all the systems in place about, procurement processes and HR processes and so on and so forth. From that up to, of course, code of conduct and prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse and so on. All of these things they want to see in place, that you have the tools to respond, you have the tools to check, and you have the tools to report on resources. So all of these things have to be in place. Then you can go out with basically shopping with this. Obviously, if you have a few stories that you have done, human interest stories, now we call them, of course, in this sector, that would be also interesting. People are always interested in stories. Rasha, who is 38, is a mother of 2, and she, benefited from my program by getting XYZ, and now she managed to open her own little shop of, I don't know, making a little studio in the refugee camp, and now she's making other people's images because she came as a photographer, but she was displaced, and now I helped her to start her own studio business, and so on. So this is a story. This is a human interest story, a successful story, a mother of 2 who was displaced, lost everything, lost her life. With your help, she managed to open her own studio, and now she's working. And this is her story and her testimony. So these would be things that definitely having your internal structures and kind of your organization intact and well communicated to the outside world. I would say aim small first. There's definitely some quick wins with local or regional donors. International donors, the huge problem with this whole sector of development / humanitarian aid is and I'm going to be very straightforward, as Gail knows me, is the funding architecture, which again comes from specific countries with specific agendas. And at the moment, actually, since the start of the Ukraine war, we sitting here, some of us sitting here in the African continent, have seen how funding has gone down, almost zero. And now it's slowly the pledges are coming back to the East Africa, I would say, and Central Africa region. But it has really disappeared. A lot of the funding pools were just taken to Ukraine. And that's what happened. And we're talking about people hungry in Somalia and Northeast Kenya and parts of Ethiopia. We're talking about DRC having huge flare-ups of conflict and violence. We're talking about Sudan having a fully fledged war, 1.2 million people displaced. I mean, we're talking about catastrophes around us, pockets of catastrophes, and nobody really is giving money for them. The World Food Program saying they will reduce the food basket to refugees in Kenya, and they're also reducing it in different other contexts like parts of the Middle East because of funding. So as you can see, even big fish are not able to sustain their operations. So I would say aim small. Look at also like local church groups, local individuals as well, rich people in your community. Doesn't have to always be these big ones. Then you can also look at the big organizations like Save the Children, like CARE, like all these bigger ones, because there's a localization agenda that was supposed to be, it's nice big words, right? But you can always like play on that and like milk that card that you are a local organization, that you are there, that after these guys are gone, you are still going to be there and you can still work with your community. So target those people with this statements, with these clear statements that you are going to be the one doing the work, because they will also milk it back, by the way, in their reports. So you use that also against them. They will always say, oh, but we work with like 5 local organizations. Look at us, we're helping them, So, be the one like knocking on people's doors and telling them, here, I do this kind of work. You should, try to, let's connect and let's collaborate. It is really like trying to look for a job, but you're trying to look for funding. So you really have to be very proactive and like go around selling yourself, that is your organization, with all these tools. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, it's very complex.
I thought it was a wonderful answer. You really covered a lot of, concepts, right? That go into telling a story and then using the story or hoping that the story can lead towards fundraising, because it's just such an interesting dynamic, right? To even have to like be asking for money, this gap between those who are giving it and those who are asking for it is just so wide, unnecessarily so. And I really appreciated that you uplift the positive stories, the benevolence of storytelling versus, as you said, poverty poor, or sometimes the believers think that they have to have a long paragraph that is showing strife first. They have to prove their value through a confession that's really hard, and saying that over and over again is draining. So I appreciate that you bring up.
Look, the work that was mentioned in the DRC is very important. This is a huge example, like women, girls not having access to sanitary napkins. And this is also the same case in Kenya. And I will speak of Kenya because I know the context here. End up getting raped, getting, pregnant at a very early age, dropping out of school, a small, a very simple subject, that is a sanitary napkin, is so valuable for a young girl to kind of continue with her supposed way of life, the supposed trajectory for any human being around the world, even during times of crisis. She should be able not to have that, and not to have to do sexual favors in exchange for it, or get pregnant in exchange for it, or drop out of school in exchange for it. So it is a very small thing, and it is a basic human right for women and girls. And it's amazing that actually this is still something that is not recognized as so, important. And it angers me as a woman, because I see it all the time, and I'm like, why do I get to have that and they don't have it? So it's always this dilemma when I go to the field and see this. Very simple, and just even connecting these dots, like how one sanitary napkin can cause a huge shift in a girl's life, either
Right.
this route or this route, is a story on its own.
Right. I agree. And that passion and connecting to what I know about it and what my resources are. Yeah, I agree. It's the work that the believers are doing is amazing every day, in the, one step in front of the other. How do I help this person? How do I help this community? How do I help a woman deliver her baby safely, right? How do I make sure that the water that they're drinking doesn't have a ton of bacteria in it? And I mean, it's huge. And I have so much respect for the power of story and the power of personal story, how that amplifies our awareness of the world and uplifts us all in the process, I think. I hope. I know. Gosh, we have to come to an end, and I wish we could continue talking. I'm so grateful that we have this recording, because I know that the people in our network will watch it later. Thank you. And I just wanted to close with, do you have a recommendation of like, say, some other articles or some other resources that we could share with the network that are going to expand on what it is that you're talking? Maybe even just a simple, how to teach the use of a camera, or something about, like, related to using your phone I mean, if you can think of that now, or you want to send it later, but we like to follow up sometimes with precise apps or tools, or lessons, let's say, for lack of a better word, for those who want to practice what you've been talking about.
Yeah, well, first of all, guys, YouTube has a lot of videos. Like, that platform can teach you anything, basically. So, like, use it. It's for free. Second of all, I think Photographers Without Borders is a very interesting resource, just to see also how because they basically work with a lot of civil society organizations around the world to tell their stories. So they try to link a photographer from from the membership pool with an organization somewhere in the world to help them tell more stories and basically fundraise for the organization through that assignment. What I can do actually, Gail, maybe later by email, you can send me some names of some of the local organizations, and then I can link them up with Photographers Without Borders with CEO Danny. She's very cool.
Okay.
Canada, and see, you know, they do accept recommendations for new civil society organizations, and they usually focus on grassroots level, so very small. That, you know, I did an assignment for them in a slum. Ian would know it, called Githurai 45, just outside of Nairobi. Many Kenyans, I don't know, Ian, what you think, but many Kenyans, when I tell them I went to Githurai 45, they'd be like, "What? Why?" And like, "You didn't die?" And I'm like, no, but it's, you know, it's kind of known for a lot of insecurity and so on. But just looking at what they were doing in that urban slum, and like documenting that for them, you see the reaction, like, why did you go to Githurai 45? What the hell is wrong with you? But yeah, so I went there to support a local organization, grassroots, to tell the stories of some of their programs that were helping small businesses and students to go to school, basically. So what they were doing is very simply linking sponsors, like anybody living in the US or Australia or wherever, to if they want to support a young person in Nairobi to go to school. So very simple work. And I can definitely recommend or link them to Danny or to Photographers Without Borders as an organization. And there is an article that I will also share later that is very interesting about decolonizing the language of photography, because I like the Photographers Without Borders because I really learned the ethics, or how to make it more ethical to use a camera, because again, I don't think it's very ethical in its inherent form. The language of, I'll try to find it now, 1 second. Danny Silva, because it was, I think, a published article, so language of photography.
And I just put in a link in the chat for the Photographers Without Borders. That's a great idea. And we will definitely tell you the names of the organizations and their locations, and you can make some considerations.
Yeah, I want to share this. So this is a very interesting, please guys, open it before we close this chat and read it later. It's a very short article, but it's very interesting how, you know, the words take, trigger, capture, slave, all of master, all of these are language, are terms in photography, and how they are so wrong. You know,
I know, even the word pose. Will you pose? It's like, what? No, you pose, you stand over there.
I mean, just like food for thought, right? To kind of like remember what we're saying, you know. It's really weird because the cameras still have them. When you buy a camera, you will see that it says, asks you if this flash is a slave or the master flash. I'm like, oh my God, it's neither, it's just a flash.
Oh my gosh, wow.
So yeah, so like this is the kind of like the field that we work in, but definitely the thing is with Photographers Without Borders, it's a bit of a pricey membership, but what I can do again is just to link certain organizations, certain teams with them, and try to recommend and see how they will. They're slow, but it's a big organization, but hopefully it will result in linking you guys with some fundraising opportunities from their side.
Sounds great. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're
I just
welcome.
clap my hands and say thank you. And
thank you for having me. This was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. And I would like to have the recording for the session as well, please, Abhinav.
Yes, I will circle back with a YouTube link that it's going to be, it's unlisted unless you feel comfortable publishing it. So we'll just send it to you and then to the community. Gail and I like to think of this as like a coffee house chat with folks from all over, talking about something very specific, and being able to have like 1 hour every month where just put everything aside and just like have a conversation. So this was one of the most like rich conversations that we've hosted, and so thank you for making the time and just all of the wisdom and the very, very specific advice that you've given, I think, for this community and for every single person here. means a great deal to us, and I'm sure for the rest of the group who haven't been able to join here as well. We will circle back with some of the more specific items. I think maybe a recommendation list for the Photographers Without Borders will definitely be on that, and potentially maybe having you back again at some point in the future. As you publish and write and share, I think we would love to kind of be a vehicle to also inspire our community. So we'll stay in close touch and continue updating you as well.
Thank you so much. And hopefully I will see you soon. And Gail,
Yes.
I will hopefully also see you soon. I don't know when the semester is starting, but I hope I'm going to be again a TA on it. And everybody else, thank you so much for your questions. And it was really interesting for me to engage in discussions with you. You have my email, Instagram account. Just reach out whenever you need.
Thank you so much, Rasha. And thank you everyone else for being here as well. If you're watching the recorded version, we will be hosting another one in a few weeks' time in July. So look forward to seeing you for the July convening. And thank you again for just being part of this community. Take care, you all. Talk to you soon. Happy Wednesday.
Bye, guys.
Bye.